actually the whole language. And that's why most of the contemplatives, if not all of them, they have used a poetic language. They haven't used just the simple language of philosophers or whatever. Always a poetic language, and this is also the language of all religions. And according to some philosophers, religion is a higher poetry, and that is very true, because in the case of higher experiences, you have to use a higher language, and that higher language can be found only in poetry and in poetical expressions where symbolism and figurative language is predominant. So that's why you see, for in the case of Rumi himself, as I said to you, he has got a book also, which is not a book written by him himself. It's a book, a collection of his speeches. It is very dull. It is very dull. It is not as impressive poetry, and his poetry is much, much more impressive because it is poetry. Because there actually Rumi can use this very important equipment, instrument of figurative and mythical language, and that's why it is so influential. And this to some extent give you the power in order to relate the higher experience of a mystic, of a lover, in whose union with the beloved he has discovered things that the intellect cannot discover and cannot conceptualize. Okay, so the shortcoming of the language actually is a reflection of the shortcoming of intellect. So we come now to the business of the intellect, of reason, because after all, language is the external intellect, and intellect is the internal language, if you like. The internal language to ourselves is our intellect, our reason, but when we exteriorize it, when we make it, you see, affable, we would like to convey it to others, our intellect actually shows itself in the garb and in the shape of our language. The more intellectual you are, the better language you can use. The finer language, the less inconsistent language you will use. So that is a sign of your intellectuality and the quality of your intellect and or your reasoning. So as I said, the language is, so to speak, the exterior intellect, and the intellect is the interior language, if you like. Now the shortcut of the language means the shortcomings of the intellect. So any theory about language will automatically translate into a theory about the intellect. Any theory about the language, and that was indeed the policy of the logical positivists in the modern time. You see, their program was the continuation of the Kantian program. In the Kant, you will see he discusses the shortcomings or the limitations or the characteristics of the intellect, of the reason, of human understanding, and so on and so forth. But in the modern time, in the case of the positivists and the logical positivists, you see their main concern is with the language rather than the intellect itself, because the language is the manifestation, if you like, of the intellect. And in order to catch the intellect, the handiest thing to put your hand on is the language. Therefore, they actually chose and selected the language in order to discuss it and in order to deal with it, to disclose the shortcomings of the intellect, and so on and so forth. Now you will see that in Rumi as well, the thing goes exactly the same way. He begins with discussing language and telling us that the language is not enough, is not sufficient for describing the higher experiences of man and of the contemplative, and then he goes on and moves on to discuss the reason or the intellect. I am not sure which word I use, reason or intellect. From one point of view, of course, reason is maybe better, because the idea of the word reason, coming from ratio in Latin, means at the same time reason and rationing. You know, rationing, dividing the food, and this is at the root of the word reason. means something as if had been divided among people. Ration. The rational people does not have the universal intellect. It is partial reason that they have got. So there has been a process of rationing before people become rational. So, and this is very, very close to what Rumi intends actually. That we have got partial reason. We do not have universal reason. We do not have a perfect reason, a complete reason. It's only part of the universal reason that everybody of us has got and possess. So, and that was actually the idea in Old Greek, that they differentiated between the intellect and the reason. The reason is the partial reason, and the intellect somehow resembles the universal reason or the perfect reason. But anyway, in Rumi, of course, you sometimes use the Arabic word aql, which you find it in all Arabic literature, in Quran as well, and sometimes uses the Persian word of which exactly means the same thing. But of course, the connotation in Arabic, which I should mention, is this, that aql in Arabic originally and mainly means to prevent. Okay. Therefore, aql in Arabic mainly means the practical reason rather than theoretical reason. This is something that one has to be very careful when reads Quran, the religious literature, because there in Quran we find in many places and many times that tell us and recommend us to use our reason, our aql. And this has been sometimes misinterpreted by commentators. They thought that aql here means reason in the Greek sense of the word, or intellect in the Greek sense of the word, whereas it does not. It is practical reason, and practical reason is very keen to a kind of morality, ethicality, taqwa, piety, things like that. So that is the meaning of the aql in the original sense of it. Nowadays, of course, in Arabic literature and everywhere, aql is of course used both, in both cases, practical as well as theoretical reason. But kharad in Persian, of course, there is no such a distinction in the meaning of the word. But in the case of Rumi, anyway, reason, when compared with love, of course, scores much less than love itself. You remember that I mentioned that according to him, cleverness is for Iblis, for the Satan, and love is for human beings. Human beings' main property is love, and Satan's main property is cleverness. He was clever, according to Rumi, because he was a good calculator. And that is the main function of reason, calculation, and being a good merchant. Okay, he was a good calculator. When God actually ordered him to prostrate to Adam, he said, I am better than Adam. I am made from fire and he is made from clay, and therefore I am better, therefore he should prostrate to me rather than me to him. And that was a calculation which showed his cleverness, but this is satanic cleverness. It is not a divine cleverness, and that's what makes cleverness in his case lower than love. داندون کو نیکبخت و محرم است. A fortunate man will know زیرکی ز ابلیس و عشق از آدم است ابلیس. Love is from Adam and for Adam, a property and a possession of Adam. So when it comes to cleverness, intellect, Rumi has, however, to tell us that this is much weightier than the other, and scores much better than the other, is more precious than the other. And now I am going to discuss this and to see why reason is like this. By reason, Rumi means the whole and everything of human beings. Do not, bother yourself with the modern theories about reason and understand these things, because all these are lumped together in Rumi.